Thank you, Ethan. Oh, wait a minute, am I the only one who can't hear? Yes, I was muted that. Okay, okay. Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. You want me to start over? It's on the recording, okay.
Someone's saying you need to be let in out in front of City Hall.
The other side's open for one more.
We're at the Port of Moron, we're not at City Hall.
Oh, that would be one problem.
Okay, I'm not getting a response for Commissioner tonight. Commissioner Barisi? Commissioner Irons?
Present.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Sykes?
Here.
Commissioner Wenholtz?
Here.
Commissioner Peterson? Is that Liz Peterson? No, yes. The county commissioner.
Yes.
Oh, Liz Peterson. Commissioner Ekstrom? Commissioner Kilkenny? Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Thompson? Commissioner Cooley? Commissioner Finch?
Here.
Commissioner Peterson? Elizabeth? Oh, Gus is here. Commissioner Henthorn? And Commissioner Iowa? Henthorn is online. Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Yeah, got it.
Good?
Yep.
All right, so welcome to everybody online and in person. So the purpose of the work session today is to present and take comments on a preliminary draft of the Boardman Transportation System that we call a TSP. The work session feedback will be instrumental in the preparation of the final draft TSP before the formal adoption process beginning in October 2025. The workshop this evening will be conducted as follows. We'll have the introduction of the planning official, Carla McLean. Then we'll have the introduction of the consulting team. We will have a presentation of the draft TSP, question and answers from the planning commission, city council, and board of commissioners in attendance and online, and a public comment based on the limitations as outlined on the agenda. So if you wish to speak, please fill out a comment form and submit it to the city clerk. I will recognize those people who wish to speak. Any questions should be addressed through me. Please state both your name and address for the record when you come to the podium as the workshop is being recorded. Please keep your comments concise and to the point. We'll make it, depending on how many people we'll have, we'll try to go with 5 minutes. So let's go. The purpose of this workshop is to ensure that the two planning commissions, the Morrow County Board of Commissioners, and the Boardman City Council all understand what the Boardman TSP is intending to accomplish and to outline the upcoming adoption process. The discussion tonight is a workshop and is not a public hearing. Public hearings will commence once a final draft TSP is complete and notices provided to the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development. While comment is being requested, it is not testimony to the record. The record will be established as part of the public hearing process. Staff report, planning official Carla McLean will now kick off this workshop.
Thank you, Mayor Kiefer. So I'm not gonna say a lot, and also expressing my thanks for all of you being here. Hopefully through this process, we will address kind of the adoption process and the expectation of each of the bodies that are here. But if Matt Hugard is ready, I'm gonna pass the conversation to him. The process that we're undertaking is a grant that was provided to the city of Boardman by through ODOT and the Department of Land Conservation and Development. It is TGM grant. The consultant lead for that is Kittleson and Associates, and the subcontract for the development code components is MIG, which stands for three names and I don't know what it is. So Matt, I will just pass it to you. It looks like you've shared your screen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just confirm people can hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, well, good evening, everybody. My name again is Matt Hugart, and I'm a principal planner here from Kittleson and Associates. As Carla mentioned, we're the prime consultant helping the city prepare the technical analysis that goes into the transportation system plan. I'll recognize three people, two of which are online. The one that isn't here tonight is my colleague Isa Gagalis. She had a large hand in preparing the draft before us this evening, so I wanted to give her some recognition. Unfortunately, she is on her honeymoon right now and couldn't be here. So I'll also recognize Shayna Rayberg from MIG. She's on the line, and she is our sub-consultant assisting us with a component of the TSP update that involves the development code and the development ordinances that go into recognizing the new TSP. And you'll hear from Shayna later in the presentation. Also online is Devin Hearing from ODOT. Devin represents ODOT, and they are the grant project. He's a grant project manager. As Carla mentioned, or I don't know, can't remember if she did mention this or not, but this project is funded by a grant from the TGM program, the Transportation Growth Management Program, which is jointly funded by ODOT and the LCD. So Devin's here wearing two hats today. He's the grant project manager in charge of making sure we do what we're supposed to be doing and making sure everyone's getting paid. And then he's also representing ODOT and ODOT interests this evening. So I got a brief not a brief presentation, but a detailed presentation that goes into the content of the draft itself. So I'll just walk you through it. If and when you have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to interrupt me, and we'll take them as we go. So going over the agenda. Thought I'd just start off a little bit. I know the members of the Boardman Planning Commission and City Council have seen this slide before, so just bear with me. This is more for the benefit of our friends from Morrow County. But the Transportation System Plan, if you're unfamiliar with that term, or TSP, is essentially just the long-range component of the city's comprehensive plan, focusing exclusively on transportation and transportation-related topics. The modern TSP is a multimodal TSP, so it deals more with just roadways and freight, but it deals with transit, deals with bicycle, pedestrian, and any mode of transportation that's kind of critical to the local jurisdiction. Boardman's TSP was last updated in 2001, or last prepared formally and officially in 2001. It's had some minor updates, a handful of minor updates since that time, but it was time for a complete refresh of the TSP. So the city reached out to the TGM program, submitted their application. For
trunk and it's not moving any.
Yeah, for a grant, and then they were awarded a grant. So a couple months later, the grant process transpired, and our team was selected to help lead the effort. Why are we updating it now? As I mentioned, the city was awarded a TGM grant. As you well know, living in the area, that Boardman and the surrounding areas experience pretty significant population growth. A lot of that is in residential and commercial infill development. And then continued long-term expansion of the Port of Morrow and the industries that it serves. All this has led to, as you probably have experienced, some increased traffic demand on the system. So the TSP is timely to help address that. It also aligns with the city's goals for sort of evolving its transportation system over the next 20 years. And with that growth requires some fresh thinking. So a lot of the projects you'll see in the maps that I'll show here in a little bit are a reflection of that. So I think what I was just going to plan to do is just walk through the main components of the draft of the TSP. I believe everyone should have received a PDF copy of that draft. And most of what I'm going to show on the screen here this evening are the figures. But we can go and pause and dive into the content of the TSP if questions come up. But just for visual purposes, I'll stick to the figures for now, but we can go into the details as needed. when we started this TSP update, we really, we worked with city staff and members of the public in our advisory committee, and based on feedback we received along the way, we kind of settled on kind of three main goals to support this TSP, focusing on the topics of improving the safety of the roadway and multimodal network in the city, improving the mobility of that network. In other words, how can we improve people's ability to get from one part of the city to the other, more efficiently and quickly. But we also focused on the goal of what we call accessibility and connectivity. So it's not just about how quickly we can get from one place to another, but it's how can we build a redundant system that allows for enhanced connectivity from one part of the city to the other. We also had a goal that focused on community. So we wanted to make sure that this plan was right-sized and appropriate and met the needs of all of the citizens of Boardman. And so we had a lot of goals that tried to kind of hone in on that subject. I think sustainability was also a topic of discussion, making sure that what we plan for and what we build is mindful of impacts to not only the environment, but to properties and right-of-way acquisitions, to minimize that and do it in a way that also minimizes the impacts to the environment and sensitive areas. And then lastly, which I think is the goal for almost every TSP I've ever worked on, is just looking at it from a more of a strategic investment standpoint. And we know a lot of communities, and Boardman none is not excluded from this list. You develop these TSPs and you end up with a project list that is many millions of dollars more than the city reasonably and likely has to fund itself over that 20-year period. So how can we identify priority projects that fit within the limited funds that the city is expected to have? And then when we don't have those funds, at least identifying ways in which the city can potentially increase its revenue opportunities over time to help close that gap. So those were the 6 goals. There's a number of objectives that I won't get into, but the TSP that you're going to be that we're going to be focusing on this evening is kind of rooted in these 6 main goals. So I think one of the first chapters of the TSP is kind of a chapter that talks about guiding the transportation network, and this was the product of a map. Many hours and conversations were spent trying to rectify the ownership of the roads in Boardman itself. There was a lot of confusion as to who owns and operated and maintained certain roads. And so this is a product of that map, this map is a product of that effort. Most TSPs have some kind of a roadway jurisdiction map that kind of lays the foundation for who's responsible for what. So there's not a lot of importance in this map other than just making sure that we've clarified and cleaned up some discrepancies. One of those discrepancies I'll point out is actually who owns and operates some of these roads up here in the Port of Morrow. And we work closely with the port officials and even got resolutions to the effect that adopted resolutions that state that Marine Drive and Ullman Boulevard are indeed the sole responsibility and ownership of the Port of Morrow. And so we got a map that formally reflects that. The next map is kind of a colorful map here, but it's what we call the roadway functional classification system. So it's basically, if you look at any transportation plan developed in the state of Oregon, almost every TSP has this map that shows how the roadway network is classified. The classification that we're focusing on here for the city is broken down into really 5 substantive classifications. You got the freeway classification, which obviously includes and is limited to I-84 and the I-84 on and off ramps. But then when you drill down into the city level, you have what we call arterials, which are the highest order arterials, highest order roadways in the city. They provide the greatest degree of access, or not access, greatest degree of mobility through the city. And And so they're, shown in this map, it's kind of limited to the obvious routes through town, such as Main Street, Columbia Avenue, Wilson Lane, and Coonsley Lane. Those are all recognized as not only a high importance local, but regional travel routes within and through the city. So they got the arterial designation. And one way to read this map is you'll see solid lines represent existing roads, and the dashed orange lines represent intended or proposed or planned roadway extensions. And then this map identifies the classification that would be given to that extension. So when you see an orange line, a solid orange line, that's an existing classified arterial road. A dashed orange line represents a planned extension of an existing or a future road or a new road. And the classification according to the color is how it would be classified after it's built. So beyond arterials, you'll have collectors and neighborhood collectors and then local streets. So this map outlines all of the existing and proposed functional classification network for the city. Maybe this is a good time to pause. Any questions on the roadway jurisdiction or the functional classification map before we move on?
I've got one, Matt. This is Commissioner Peterson. It looks like the, one of the proposed, future arterials for Oregon Trail Boulevard. It looks to me like it's supposed to go all the way through, but where the urban growth boundary is, there's a blank. Is it intended to go all the way through? Could you explain that spot?
Yeah, great question. So legally in the state of Oregon, we're not allowed to plan for roadways outside of a city's urban growth boundary. So this is a recognition, and this is something we can discuss here this evening, but it kind of led through our planning process. It was kind of determined that at some point in the future, and maybe Carla can speak to this in a little bit more certainty, but the city, I think in the long term is interested in expanding its UGB to incorporate this hole, I'll call it, on the south side of I-84 between Olson Lane and Laurel Lane. And if and when that UGB expansion was to take place, we've set up the bounds, the other opposite ends of the boundary of that hole to accommodate what would likely and ideally be a logical extension of Oregon Trail Boulevard through that area if and when it were to ever be incorporated into the city's urban growth boundary and then adopted into the city limits. Anything you want to add to that, Carla, or did I capture it correctly?
No, I would just say that as the city of Boardman, we can plan inside our city limits and urban growth boundary and can't plan in the county. Matt is correct. We have been in conversations with an interested party, but no application has been submitted yet. So it's hard to speak to a lot of detail. But just from the city's planning perspective, it makes sense for us to figure out how Wilson and Coonsley both connect eventually one way or the other to Tower and Bombing Range Road, to Main Street. And we're just trying to make the same kind of alignment happen with Oregon Trail to serve as a future arterial. And again, it would connect from Paul Smith Road, and again, as we see it, to Laurel Lane. And as a city, I mean, if we were planning for 50 years, we would look at that to extend further as we think the city will grow east and or west. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this map? Okay, I'll move on. The next map is just a recognition that we have some industries in town that generate a lot of freight traffic. And we have some sort of, I think, a recognition that those industries need to rely upon the city's roadway network for part of the ability to serve that use. And so this was a map that was generated out of a couple of rounds of discussion with our committees. But it's a map that kind of shows what we break in the truck freight system down into what we call the regional freight routes. So those would be those routes that you can logically expect there to be some regional freight accommodation. So it's I-84, and it's Columbia Boulevard, at least the portion of Columbia Boulevard that goes within and through the Port of Morrow, and most likely, or most ideally, the portion that goes east outside of the Port of Morrow and the city limits. And then portions of Marine Drive and Oldman Boulevard. Those are the regional freight routes. And then we also recognize there are local freight routes. So local freight routes would be businesses within the city of Boardman that are generating deliveries, but probably not generating major freight traffic on an hourly or daily basis. It's just the occasional local project or local truck deliveries for delivering goods and services to businesses. And so in between, one of the things that was recognized was the port's need to serve what we call the high, wide, and heavy freight. So it's the big freight coming off of the barges on the river, and then the ability and the need to get that freight traffic, that oversized freight traffic back to the regional freight routes such as I-84. And so the blue lines overlaid on the reds and the yellows represent the port's current travel routes that they rely upon for getting some of that high, wide, and heavy freight traffic from their docks along the river and on and back to the regional freight route. So this is a map that just sort of recognizes that hierarchy of accommodating freight traffic. It doesn't mean that all freight traffic is going to be absolutely limited to these routes. It's just these are the routes that the city would then recognize as being routes that could accommodate and would need to be addressed when it comes to improvements over time and making sure that freight is not ignored or overlooked if and when improvements are made at some point in the future. So kind of beyond these three maps here, the rest of these maps that we'll show here, these are the actual project maps. And so within the packet that you received, not only all these maps have a table. And so the way to interpret these maps, if you haven't figured that out yet, is all of the lines that you see on this map, the dashed lines represent new roads or new intersection projects. And if they're dashed, that means they don't exist today, and we are planning for their eventual construction or development at some point. And whether that construction or development occurs as part of a city capital-led project, or it's a product of condition on private development, the numbers on the map correspond to the description in the table. So project R1, for example, would be extension of Boardman Avenue at its present terminus all the way over to Olson Road and all the other projects that go with it. So those projects are identified in tabular form. They're also identified in map form. I don't know if we want to go through each and every one of these projects, probably not, but I'll point out a few that came up over the course of this project. You'll notice a big green square over the I-84 Main Street interchange. And then you'll also notice some more specific, intersection-based notations at some of the intersections, including the I-84 ramp terminals, and then the intersections at Main Street and Boardman Avenue. One of the big findings that we found in the operations analysis that we did and the forecasting work is a recognition that most of the residential growth and commercial growth in the city is on the south side of I-84. Whereas most of the freeway-oriented retail growth potential is spanning both the north and the south sides of I-84. And when you kind of forecast the traffic-related growth that could result from that potential development over a 20-year period, you start to see some capacity limitations associated with the existing I-84 Main Street interchange ramp terminals and the intersections adjacent to it. And it got to a point where the findings really did suggest that some major interchange improvements were needed and necessary at that interchange. Not only to the interchange itself, but to the on and off ramps and the overpass structure over I-84. And it got so detailed that it was felt that through some separate coordination with ODOT, that the best approach for this TSP was to not itemize the specific levels of improvement for that interchange, but to identify a future planning study called an interchange area management plan, and identify the funds for the city to go back at some point in the near future and reinvestigate the best modifications for that interchange. Going into a certain level of detail that would not only identify what's the best form for that interchange, whether we continue with the diamond interchange form that we have today, or whether a modification of that interchange form is more appropriate given the change in long-term traffic demand that we're forecasting. And then I think more importantly, based on a lot of the feedback we've received from local businesses within the vicinity of that interchange, is to maybe reinvestigate and relook at how the city deals with the Main Street and North and South Front Street intersections. There was a planning study done back in 2009, and it was adopted locally by the city of Boardman, called the Main Street Interchange Area Management Plan. And that IAMP, while it was a decent planning study at the time, I don't think it forecasts the level of growth that Boardman, or anticipated the level of growth that Boardman has experienced over the last 15 years. And as a result, some of the findings within that IAMP are not very specific or appropriate based on kind of what we're projecting going forward. So this R25 project is essentially just money for the city to go back and reopen that IAMP and really dig into the specifics of how to improve that interchange and the on and off ramps in the adjacent intersections. So that's, I think, one of the big kind of more controversial projects that I would anticipate this body here this evening to want to talk about. I think a lot of the other projects that you see on this map and the dashed lines represent what I would consider to be sort of logical extensions of the grid network that the city has currently built for itself, recognizing that there are large swaths of the city, namely like this big corner down here, the southeast corner of Main Street and Wilson. It's, there's nothing on the books right now, but I think if the winds keep blowing the way they are blowing, it's reasonable to assume that some future development could occur on that site. So this plan recognizes that potential and outlines a continuation of the collector and arterial street grid to support that eventual future development. If no development pressure happens, then that parcel continues to be farmed over time. But if it does, then the city has a plan, and the city engineers and city planners have a plan in place to help guide the development in that area. Everything else on the map here, I think, is again just a recognition that there are some logical extensions that need to be filled in over time, and it helps to create that grid and that redundant, accessible street network that we wanted to see built through that goals and policies process at the beginning of the TSP. So I will stop here. I imagine there's a few questions from folks in the room, and have at it.
They got any questions?
Why is there no additional off ramps leading into Boardman? Considering the growth, we got one main way to get into town. That's it. And if you drive around the state, there's plenty of cities that they have additional ones. They're close. They're nearby each other, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. But for some reason in Boardman, we're told that's a problem.
Yeah, good question. This is an anticipated question. I think if you look at the standards that ODOT has set for itself when it comes to access to interstates, can't remember the exact details. I should have looked this up and been better prepared for this particular comment, but There are some basic standards that ODOT adheres to when it comes to providing access to interstates. And I believe please don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 1.5 to 2 miles or more between major ramp access points. And if you just look at the limited frontage that Boardman has between Laurel Lane and Main Street, and the existing boundaries on either side of that, there just isn't enough room to fit in another freeway interchange access point and still adhere to the standards that ODOT and the FHWA adhere themselves to. So that's the simple answer. I'm sure it doesn't cover all the questions, but that's fundamentally where it's rooted. So
So did Hood River get an exception to that? Cause they have like 3 exits right next to each other.
yeah, there are always exceptions, and I don't doubt that you'll find many if you look around the state. And those exceptions are typically granted when there are hardships, or perhaps some of these things were built before the standards were adopted. I can't speak to any specifics with regards to Hood River, but my guess is some of those access points were established before the access spacing standards were set and adopted on ODOT side, and or there were special exceptions granted for reasons that I wouldn't know about. But those are the two ways you can get around that.
But it could be done.
I'm not saying it absolutely can't. I'm just saying fundamentally it would not adhere to the standards that ODOT looks for. And so we're kind of focusing ourselves on that stance at the moment.
The conversations, I'll add a little bit to that, Matt, the conversations that we've had as part of the PAC process, and then some of the follow-up that we've had with ODOT. The 2 current access points, exits, are a mile apart. That is already outside of the separation standards. So to do anything between them, the folks, again, that we've participated with in this process have been pretty clear. I mean, we've asked them about kind of extending the on-ramp from the Fort Moro to just then become the off-ramp for the Main Street. And even having that conversation has been limited. We haven't gotten very far with that conversation. So it's not that we're not asking those questions, we're just not getting the kind of response we would like from ODOT, and they are relying on their standards.
I will add, even though we haven't focused a particular project on a map like this, that it looks at the possibility of a third interchange. We did include a kind of 2 things that I think might work in that direction. So it's kind of hard to see on the map here, but the R24 project is a project that's currently in your current TSP, and we carried it forward because we think it would have some validity. It's probably going to be a hard one to try and fund and build, but it's a recognition that Olson Road can and should be extended either or over I-84, and that wouldn't be a direct access to the freeway. It would just be an overpass connecting the north and the south side. So it's basically a third way to get north-south of the freeway. That is one project in here. And then I think it's understood that under the R25 revisiting of the old 2009 IAMP, that the interchange access form and function would be completely revisited as part of that. And that could involve and might mean some creative solutions that maybe nobody has thought about, such as connecting via a frontage road, perhaps the Laurel Lane interchange to the Main Street interchange, and perhaps using Front Street as some kind of a feeder road or a limited access connection between those 2 interchanges. That is all within the realm of possibility under the R25, is to not only revisit, but rethink how the Main Street interchange can not only function as it's a main access to Main Street, but maybe function as a way to better serve the area in between the Laurel Lane and Main Street interchanges. So those are all on the table. So Devin, you had your hand up and I started to talk over you. I apologize, but yeah, go ahead. So,
No, I'm right there with you, but anecdotally, this is an NHS roadway, I-84, so the national system, so the exception to the national system has downstream effects across the country. So I think what you're seeing for exceptions to the minimum distances are maybe a lot of times off the interstate. But I would agree that the ones you will find on the interstates are probably pre-existing access points and not newer access points. Again, what we do here affects the national system, being 84. That's great for Boardman to be on the national system, but then on the other hand, the effects, span the entire nation when we make these sort of decisions.
And we have that question.
sorry, did I hear there was another question?
We scheduled an hour and a half, so please.
I think years ago we talked about, and I don't know that I can read those numbers and my print isn't any better. But essentially taking Kincaid, and taking it all the way across the empty lot to Anderson Lane. That would require a purchase of a home that's sitting there, and that's been the conversation. But in the map, it has two new roads going north south versus east west. So I see the little connection to connect Kincaid, but it's not all the way through.
So I think I'll take that one, Matt. I think that there are a couple of factors. Do understand that as a TSP, this is guidance. We don't know what roads will be built because until we have a development proposal, we don't know what they're gonna ask for. We know generally, and this is based on the downtown development plan, that we probably want a road that connects Oregon Trail Boulevard to Wilson through there. But again, depending on what they propose to develop, it's gonna kind of drive what kind of traffic impacts there might be and how you would want to distribute that traffic, north, south, east or west. The downtown development plan actually envisions connections from all three streets, City Center Circle, Kincaid and Willow Fork. But again, depending on development, we don't know what they're gonna ask for. So until we see a development application on that 60 acres, it's kind of hard to know what that response is. We've not lost sight of that connection from that property to Anderson. But we're not specifically saying there has to be a connection. If it makes sense for there to be a connection based on the type of development, then we would encourage that. But until we know what that development might be, it might be better to not create that connection. So a lot can happen in the development process, and your TSP is not law, it's guidance. Matt, I don't know if you would answer that any differently or add to that.
Yeah, I guess I would say initially we had a connection on there, and through feedback and other discussions amongst our advisory committee, it was removed. I think under the recognition that there's some sensitivity to this connection to Anderson. I guess if you put that sensitivity aside for a second, my recommendation would always be to show a connection on the plan, because if it's on the plan, you've given yourself the ability to ask for it if the circumstances present themselves. If you don't have it on the plan, you're basically telling your development community, hey, there's no expectation for a connection here. You can't make me build it. So you're gonna put yourself probably in a situation where having to ask for it through the good graces of the development community when they don't have to build it because it's not recognized in the planning document, it's a much harder ask. So I guess that's my sort of big picture way of thinking about it. It's always better to show the connections on the plan because it's hard to get them back after you commit to not providing them and there's no expectation from the development community that they have to be considered or built. So I'm not arguing against Carla. I'm just sort of pointing out the opposite way of thinking about it is if you can build it and you can't think past this, the political or the sensitive nature of the connection and the line on the map, it does give you the ultimate flexibility for constructing it at some point down the road, or having developed and constructed at some point down.
So wouldn't it be more prudent then to put all three of the roads across that lot? Willowthorne, Kincaid, and City Circle, City Center Drive?
So also applicable as kind of guidance, like the TSP is guidance, would be the downtown development plan. And they show all three of those connections there. So, yes, we could reflect them both here. But they are also reflected in the downtown development plan.
So I see that big green box, and I know he was talking about the big green box. Now, this is a draft for our transportation plan. Does that happen to talk about Boardman Avenue and Main Street? Is that in this process as well?
So, yeah, good question. So the box is looking at what would be the likely study area for the interchange area management plan. And it's think of it as a gray box. It's not a hard line on a map. It's just recognizing that the study area needs to include at least Boardman Avenue to the north and Oregon Trail Boulevard to the south, and kind of everything in between. That's what the box is roughly representing. But within that box, you'll see there are a number of intersections noted here. And the intersections were purposely left on based on a discussion we had with city staff and ODOT, under the assumption that that there are probably some interim things that might need to be looked at and considered until such time that the IAMP is formally revisited under the R25 project. So yes, the Boardman Main Street intersection is identified there, and through our planning analysis, we had identified that there will be some capacity situations that are starting to arise and will continue to persist over time as development continues to occur. And so the Boardman Main Street intersection was identified as an intersection that will need to be formally planned and improved. I think the recognition though is whatever that improvement looks like, and we've included some concepts for different intersection improvements within the IAMP or within the TSP. It's not set in stone until the R25 project solidifies it. So right now we've kind of identified a couple of different ways to treat that intersection, either through signalization, or you get a little creative and start to look at some roundabout treatments that would all work well there and better address the capacity issues. That being said, we also recognize that perhaps some of those intersection treatments would have some impacts to adjacent properties. May not be the most convenient intersection treatments for maintaining sort of the access to adjacent parcels. And that was not lost on us. We definitely understand that there will be some impacts associated with these. But we're hoping through the R25 project that there's a better solidification of potential improvements at each of these intersections, and maybe a more higher level consensus can be reached within that refined planning effort to find the best solution for all involved.
Thank you.
I have a question. So it looks like it's a little bit fractured, like Boardman. I'm assuming with the downtown planning, this is a part of the thought, but is there any effort to make a town square or something maybe away from that interchange that would be a center of Boardman to create this sense of community or festivals? Or I'm thinking about some of the other smaller towns in our family that like Heppner kind of has that town square that's the center of all the gatherings that kind of unifies the town. But I guess that's the challenge with the interstate. It just seems fractured. And is there any plan to do something like that for Boardman?
Carla, you
No,
want to take that one? Yeah.
So you've heard me reference a document called the Downtown Development Plan a couple of times. That document was actually adopted in 2001. And its focus is primarily, and maybe Matt, you can help reflect this on the map there. it predominantly reflects activity on, no, the other side. The hospital parcel, the 60-acre parcel,
Oh, okay.
yeah, that one there. It basically reflects kind of how the city envisions that property developing. And that was owned by the Mon family for many decades and has recently been sold to Good Shepherd. We've shared with Good Shepherd that this plan is out there and that, while it's not law, it is guidance, and we would hope that they would embrace it. I know they were seeking a firm to kind of master plan their property. We haven't had any recent conversations with them, hope to circle back in the near term and kind of figure out what they're thinking and where they're going. But I think they're very cognizant that the community wants to have kind of a town center. The work that we're also doing to update our comprehensive plan and development code. We're in the middle of some community input gathering right now. And that process is helping us. The question that's being asked is, where is the heart of Boardman? And in no uncertain terms, the community is focusing on kind of that stretch of property from City Hall to the other side of Main Street, kind of looking at City Center Circle as being that location where the heart of Boardman can happen. So on the west side, it's kind of the government and services area. We've got City Hall, the senior center, community counseling services, and then along Main, we have the grocery store and the bank, and I'm gonna miss somebody, Napa. We've got a couple other retail operations. What's exciting is what might happen on the other side of the street. And because of where the power lines are, we do know that the hospital was initially looking to site the medical facility as far north as possible. They moderated that because of the high voltage power lines and their desire to have lifeline. So we're hoping that they're looking at more of the center of the property, and if that is what plays out, then it really does give us the opportunity to work with them to extend City Center Circle and kind of create that opportunity for the heart of Boardman, as our comp plan consultants are kind of calling it. So that's our vision, Commissioner Finch. Hopefully that answers your question. Again, as with most communities, in some respects, we're a little reliant on what a developer may choose to do or not do. But we do think that they are
Yeah,
invest in Boardman. They made a choice to come here. We've got a sense that they are invested and want to become truly a member of the community. And I think from that perspective, they'll work with us.
yes, thank you. That's helpful. It just, I mean, I like that term heart of Boardman because I think it's much needed. And again, I think that's probably the challenge with the interstate going through there, but to create the town square, that place, that bonding, I think that would really benefit the town quite a bit. Thank you for answering that.
They buy the whole lot.
I'm sorry.
They buy the whole thing.
They did. They bought all 60+ acres. Yep.
Well, we can come back to this figure if need be. Let me maybe just move on to a few other figures. It might spur some conversations as we get into the different modes. So this map is just on intersection and roadways, but as I mentioned earlier, we also expand that planning effort to identify what's shown on this map is what we call the local street connectivity plan. Now, not every TSP has a plan like this, but because Boardman has so much infill and new development potential, more so than a lot of other cities in the state, it makes sense to create a map like this. And if you look at each of these little yellow arrows on this map, they're meant to really just show conceptual connections for the expansion of a local street network if and when infill development occurs. And so let me just pick on an area down here. I've been picking on the south east corner of Main Street and Wilson. Now, as you well know, this area down here is all being farmed and there are no immediate plans to develop it at some point in the future, but the dash lines, the gray dash lines represent those logical sort of neighborhood collector streets that would be the spinal access points to this area. And then these yellow or orangish colored arrows represent what we expect or what the city can expect local developers to adhere to, or what they will hold developers to in terms of access. So in other words, if and when this little parcel in here develops, the expectation is all the access to this parcel will not be directly off of Wilson Lane or Main Street, but it will in turn look inward and connect off of these future neighborhood collectors, these east, west, and north, south collectors. And the benefit of having a map like this is it really establishes expectations from the development community about what the city wants them to build in terms of access and circulation. Kind of takes the question off the table a little bit and helps subsequent planning staff to remember, kind of what is the best way to connect these neighborhoods to each other, and to recognize that we don't want to have a bunch of cul-de-sacs in the city. We want to make sure that we've established a grid network, and we don't have dead-end streets because dead-end streets have been shown to limit connectivity. So the more grid type of network we can provide, the better off the city will be in terms of a long-term connected neighborhood network. So this is just a map that recognizes kind of what we expect or want to see local development adhere to when it comes to access and local streets within undeveloped parcels. The next set of maps talks about the other modes, the multimodal transportation modes, so the non-motorized. This is the pedestrian projects map, and it builds off of that roadway network map. So one way to read this map is it's only identifying projects where there aren't existing streets. I'm sorry, if there are planned extensions of streets, such as these gray dashed lines down here and the future extension of Oregon Trail Boulevard, it's built on the understanding that if and when the city builds those roads or development builds those roads, they will build them with pedestrian and sidewalk networks. So there's no point in calling out separate projects on unbuilt streets. So most of the solid lines and the dashed lines that you see on this map are understanding that there are a handful or more of critical streets in the city today that don't have established pedestrian accommodations, and that there would need to be either through redevelopment of adjacent parcels or as part of capital funds on the city side to go back in and retrofit those streets to add sidewalks or intersection improvements and treatment and pedestrian crossing treatments to better serve existing and future development. So these are the pedestrian projects. A couple of critical ones to point out here. It's kind of looking, and I think for our friends at Morrow County, we're looking at the Columbia River Heritage Trail. A lot of the pedestrian accommodation projects on here are a reflection and a recognition of some of that long-term planning work that the county has been working on for many years and decades. So the city's planned pedestrian network kind of builds on what the county has been working on in terms of establishing its vision for that heritage trail. So I'll pause for questions on this map as well.
All right, your questions?
Okay. I'll just quickly jump to the bicycle projects map. If I just kind of toggle between these two, you'll see that they kind of build upon each other. I think one of the things that's a little different with the bike projects map is it recognizes that there are and will be a lot of streets in Boardman that we don't have to retrofit too significantly. If you kind of look at the Kincaid and Willow Fork Drive corridors that kind of go back into the neighborhoods, while those are some pretty wide streets, they are fairly low volume, and they're low volume enough to where you don't have to build separate bike facilities or bike lanes on those streets. So a lot of the projects here in orange are projects that would enhance the signing and striping of those roads to accommodate what we call shared lane, shared travel. So there wouldn't be separate bicycle lanes. You would just, the traffic volumes are low enough to where for most riders, maybe not small children, but most riders, there's an expectation that those roads can be shared between vehicles and bicycles. Most of the green lines on the map and the purple lines on the map show planned bicycle lane projects where we would physically widen the road and or stripe in a separated bicycle lane of some sort or a multi-use pathway. And so those are the solid green lines and the purple magenta colored lines. So that's how you would interpret and read this map here.
I don't see a path over the freeway for the bicyclists.
I'm sorry, did you say you didn't see a path over the freeway?
I don't see a path over the freeway for the bicyclists.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good question. I'm assuming you might be looking at the Olson Road connection.
Well, I'm looking at the entire freeway and I
Okay.
don't see a path for a bicyclist to get from one side of town to the other. If you live on the south side, how do you access the marina if you wanna take by bike? And I realize that there's freeway overpass, but it's not really that safe for a bicycle. It has a high-rise sidewalk for pedestrians, but no bicycle path across the freeway.
Yeah, well, good point. I kind of see your point now that I'm hearing you. I think there's maybe some tweaks that we could potentially do to this map. I think one of the things that's hard to recognize is we have purposely excluded some lines on this map. Now, for example, if you look at Main Street today, Main Street has kind of a separated multi-use pathway on the west side of the corridor south of the freeway, connecting all the way down to Wilson Road. You'll see no line on this map here, and that was purposeful on our part. We did not add it in because we know at some point in the very near future, the city's working on this right now, that they're going to be widening and expanding the Main Street corridor. And as part of that project, that's going to include separated bike lanes, formerly 6-foot bike lanes within the roadway network. So we didn't show that line on this map. And so that's one of the reasons why this looks a little disjointed. And then I think as we look at the Main Street overpass, you are absolutely correct. There are no safe, I think, or accommodating bicycle lanes over that interchange, over that overpass. And that's one of those limitations that I was noting earlier that necessitated that interchange area management plan revision project is not only is that interchange inadequate for serving long-term traffic growth in Boardman, but it's also inadequate from a height perspective. It doesn't have the right height limitations for freight traffic going under along I-84, and it doesn't have modern bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. So whatever the product is of that future IAMP and the revisit of the Main Street overpass, I think it's likely and logical, it's reasonable for us to expect that that product is going to include some pretty significant upgrades for biking and pedestrian accommodations to better connect the north and the south sides of I-84. I do also point out that the Olson Road extension is a project included in the TSP, but because it's a roadway project, we did not show a project making that connection under the assumption that if and when that connection were ever made, it would also naturally include bicycle and pedestrian accommodations. So, and I can understand why at first glance this map might show and may not look like it's providing enhanced connections, but in reality there are a handful in here. They're just not obvious to the naked eye. But in recognition of that comment, I think it might be beneficial for us to maybe add some notations to this map of that nature so that that does not carry forward and make it more confusing. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I do see your comment. I do see your point, and I think there's some things we can do to this map to better address that.
So Matt, are you suggesting that there will be some kind of a bike path that goes going across the freeway?
I think it's, if you look at, are you talking about Main Street?
No, I said you said Olson, so
Oh,
I was.
Oh,
I was
Olson, yeah.
clarification.
Yeah, I think, you know, Olson's, I'd probably put Olson in the aspirational project list. I think the reality of an Olson connection, across the freeway is an underpass, not an overpass. Just based on the grades and, the impacts to adjacent parcels. Now, if you were able to make an underpass, underneath I-84, yes, any kind of connection along those lines, the expectation would be that that underpass would include sidewalks and bicycle lanes. So project B10 on this map here is a project that would add bicycle accommodations to Olson Road, at least the existing built portion of Olson Road. And then those connections, if and when a connection underneath I-84 is ever established, that connection would continue with the roadway connection. So,
Has any thought been given to taking one of the first streets and doing some kind of a walking, biking path? Overpass that would be not for motorized vehicles, but something that would be considerably less expensive, and maybe Devon's the person to answer with it, if that's even allowed. I don't know, just asking.
yeah, that came up on a couple of conversations. I think it's hard to see under this map because the Amazon data center takes up most of this land through here, is you don't really have the ability to make that connection. So if you are ever able to make an interim connection across I-84, you have wetlands over here. And so your only way to maybe span that connection is over the freeway ramp terminals. And that gets a little bit more challenging. It's kind of hard to visualize, but your span and your connections over the freeway ramp terminals gets a little more complicated, and the elevation of that span gets higher because the elevated nature of those on and off ramps. And so it's not impossible. It just becomes, you know, one of those probably harder to
Less-
visualize and aspire to projects, but that is maybe one addition we can go back and reconsider. So,
And Matt, this Brandon, I don't see any marks and I didn't pay attention on the walking, to the marina. So there's no walking path right now currently to get, oh, good. So I see that over the bridge. No, yep, right there. And then there's no walking path really to the west from there, along the road.
are you talking about this section of Columbia?
Not on Columbia, the one, what's the road that's on? Marine Drive. So you go, yep, from Columbia, yep, over and then to the west there. Yep, on Marine Drive, yeah, there's no path. So we.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. This is one of those areas where the planning process can only take you so far. So a lot of that section of Marine Drive is not owned by the city. It's actually a private road owned by the Army Corps of Engineers. And while they do have some pathways and some other kind of goat trail connections through there, we're not planning for roads that the city has no control over. So it's not to say that we couldn't, and if the desire is to extend some lines on those maps to recognize that potential, then it's not a deal killer to add them. And if you think they're appropriate to add, then we certainly can. It's just it's not a road that the city has any authority over or control over, and so we'd be at the mercy of the Army Corps of Engineers to help establish and realize projects along those lines. So.
On any of that, have you guys thought about connecting the Oregon Trail, bike path to Blaylock and Kincaid and Willow Fork and Kincaid?
Let's see, Carla or someone, can you help me out? I'm trying to visualize what I just heard. It's not popping out at me here.
Restate your question.
So Willow Fork goes all the way through, would that not be a possibility to make a bike path on that end? Knowing that there's a lot of people that would probably ride the bike and not want to take Kincaid and could possibly take Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
So the road standard for Oregon Trail will have a bike lane as part of it.
Okay.
The road standard for Willow Fork. I have to go, we're just kind of finalizing those, the packet just went out today, I'm trying to remember how that one got amended.
It's a neighborhood collector, Carla, so it would have a shared bike
It
component
would
to
have a shared bicycle pedestrian,
But you can get out from Lawrence Road, right, where Lauren's house is out, and that's where you get her.
Yeah, and then there's
Oregon
another,
Trail.
and then there's another open access on Laylaw. That doesn't show on there.
so, right, again, we didn't identify, so this map is. Identifying primary kind of routes, we didn't get into, there needs to be, I mean, yes, we need to address bicycle and pedestrian everywhere. This map really focuses on, the highest intensity locations.
Yeah, and I think that it's high intensity because they can't take those back. I think that if they should, they would.
So you're saying that the connections are not adequate to facilitate those, so yes, at the point in time Oregon Trail gets built further and further to the west, those connections to Oregon Trail will also be created. So where Willow Fork just kind of ends nowhere.
Yeah.
It's designed to end kind of where Oregon Trail will eventually intersect.
Okay.
Yeah. So he may have a battery problem and we don't have another port to plug in. So Matt, I'm just gonna push a little bit. We're down to 5%. We're trying to figure out how we might be able to shift a little bit here and figure this out.
Lightning round, okay, lightning round, I think I'm more or less done, I've got some extra maps in here, I won't pause on these, I'll give Shayna a minute or less to maybe hit through some of the things that she's been working on related to development code and implementing ordinances, so take it away, Shayna, I'll advance the slides for you.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hey,
Yes.
yeah, I'm Shayna and I can explain our company acronym later. But basically we were brought on, as Matt said, to draft development code to implement this TSP. I would say, you know, again, purpose statements here. We were looking to align with the state's transportation planning rule or the TPR, but most importantly, implement the updated TSP. We'll just move on to the next slide. A few themes that I can actually speak to on even the following slide, in evaluating the city's existing development code and what would be needed. And I will say very plainly that in a way, not much is needed. But what we did find and what we did propose is in your packet for tonight. It's called the Draft Implementing Ordinances Memo. And there is draft code language in there in attachment A. So kind of in these three theme areas, I'd say that we found for TSP consistency, that code updates we're proposing will align the code with street spacing, road design, and traffic impact study standards developed during the TSP update process. And then regarding walking and transit supportive development, minor changes are proposed to existing pedestrian access and circulation standards. It's also proposed that transit and rideshare uses be permitted in parking lots, so long as those parking lots can still provide minimum parking. And that coordination of transit stop improvements with transit service provider, that can be required when development occurs adjacent to existing or planned transit stops.
Say, Shayna,
yeah.
I think we're just talking to the online group now. I
Oh,
think
we lost it. We lost
the
it.
entire.
I was trying to speed too.
You're back, we're just not fully connected. Can you hear me?
Okay.
We can.
Okay, I don't know what you last heard. Can you tell me what you last heard, Carla?
I think you heard most of it,
Okay.
so.
Well, excuse me for going so fast. I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but as far as the three themes, the third theme being transportation facility permitting, where changes we're proposing clarify when transportation facility permitting can be combined with other permitting, as well as when permitting is not required for transportation facilities. So that was maybe just a little fast, but point being, again, the the memo itself and the proposed code language to date is in that packet that you got tonight, so that after any comments from this group tonight, or I would imagine we'll allow you some time after tonight to comment, MIG, the company I'm with, and the project management team together will update the proposed code language that's in the packet now to be what we'll call an adoption version of the code updates, and that'll go into the public hearing process alongside the updated TSP itself. And then following the hearings, MIG will be there to prepare a final version of the code updates. So there you go. Are there any questions or comments? That was pretty fast.
I think what I would add is that the memorandum that was provided for this evening that drafted for us. As old as both the development code and the TSP is, I was surprised at how much of our code is still okay. So there's clearly some things that have happened over the last several years that have changed some of those development code implementation requirements under the transportation planning rule. But I was actually surprised that Shayna didn't say, like, just start all over. Because our code is so old and so out of date. So as much as there are changes, they are not as significant as I thought they would be. And so in some respects, it's almost like a refinement to the code, but there will be some changes.
Yeah, I definitely agree, Carla. Good bones there, even if you have an older code, like there's very good framework and bones there. So yeah, I would definitely call these refinements. And even, just kind of in some cases, procedural and somewhat technical tweaks. But yeah, a really good framework to have worked off of.
Great, thanks, Shayna.
Sure.
Carla, we're just about done here. I'll hit the adoption schedule slide and say a few closing words, and I think that concludes what I had to say this evening. So
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. So I guess one thing to point out, I said it at the very beginning, there's a deadline that we're working under. The TGM grant that's supporting this update runs out in, I believe it's December 18th. So we are trying, we are planning, we will, all intents and purposes, meet that deadline. But there's some steps that need to occur along the way in order for us to do that. The first of which is your comments here this evening. We've taken notes. If there are anything else that comes to mind that you have not shared back to Carla and her staff, please do. And please submit those comments ASAP to Carla so she can pass them on to us. We heard a few things here this evening that we might want to tweak into some of these maps, and you've raised some nice comments, and we'll revisit those and adjust the maps and the tables if necessary. But we need those comments back from you ASAP, because we're working towards the completion of basically an adoption level draft that we need to submit to DLCD on or before September 16th. That begins what we call our 35-day review window. And we can't have an evidentiary hearing before the Board and Planning Commission until the earliest date would be your next hearing on October 22nd. And assuming we get through Planning Commission and they recommend it be advanced to the Boardman City Council, we've got two potential hearing dates, one in November on November 3rd, and if needed, a second date on December 2nd. If we're successful at City Council and they adopt the TSP, we'll have just what is essentially less than 2 weeks to get it all wrapped up, buttoned up, and submitted before the deadline on the 18th. So there's certainly a ticking clock. It's manageable, but it's based on getting some good feedback and comments from you all here. And so I appreciate your willingness to sit through this presentation. You'll hear it again, unfortunately, at your respective Planning Commission and City Council hearings. But hopefully we've addressed most of the questions so that when you sit down in those hearings, some of the things you were concerned with this evening maybe the answers that we provided are result in no longer having a concern, and we can get through those hearings a little easier. So at that point, we'll have more of a focus on maybe getting the feedback from the public and the constituents who show up to hear about the draft of the TSP. So that is the kind of the steps and the plan going forward, and that concludes my slides. Carla, I'll take it back to you.
Thanks. Mayor, I'll turn it back to you for public comment.
Yes. All right, so this is time for invitation for public comment. Anyone interested in the audience, both online and in public, are invited to provide comments. Anyone may speak on the draft transportation system plan. You have 5 minutes. I bumped it up to 5 minutes per person for a total of 30 minutes. If you have filled out a comment card, go ahead and bring it up front. Anyone who wishes to do public comment, I haven't got any invitations, so anybody wishing to? I have a couple of. Mr. Boardman, you have the floor. Go right up to the podium, please. Thank you. You bet.
All right, my name is Jonathan Boardman. I'm a landowner here, right up next to 165 Boardman. Most of you people know me. I came on a first name basis. But again, I submitted something over email to the city. I'd like that to be, he mentioned that those comments, that they was taking comments, I'd like that to be added to the comments. I won't go into all the specifics there, but I really welcome the plan that we got. There's a couple things I would like to add, you know, as far as how some of this stuff is getting paid for. I wish we would have got into that. There are some ideas to get it paid for. I would like to know that the Oregon Trail from Failer Road to basically to Laurel Lane, that's basically a transmission lines corridor, and based on what I have seen, you know, with Amazon paying $41.5 million for a power line, I believe that they're also gonna pay for the power line from where they're at in Amazon, the 230 kilovolt line out to Failer Road to get it out to Boardman, the ones out there. I mean, those are things that we need to make sure that we put in there, that they are paying for it, because they're driving this growth. I mean, Boardman's budget was $21 million in 2019, and now it's $91 million. So, and a lot of that has to do from the utility electric fees and the permit fees that is driving that. But we need to make sure that those who trigger that growth pay for that growth, and that we talk about those things. As uncomfortable as they may be, we have to talk about who is really driving it and who should have to pay for it. Not on a taxpayer bond, not on an extra tax. We're taxing enough already. We have to have those uncomfortable conversations, and I really feel like it's sad because that's when we have issues within the county. It's about money, and we do have enough, and we just need to make sure that we are getting our fair share, especially when they use 90 to 95% of the resources. I'm going to do a presentation about the city water usage that is going to be very good. I hope it makes it adequate as far as how much is being used and how much we're compared to other places that are taking from the Ottawa River, and how lucky we are to live right here on the Columbia River to take the water that we can from the river and not from the aquifer. So we are in a very great position. We just need to make sure that we're taking advantage of it, and then being honest and transparent with accountability about who's really paying for it. So I really appreciate you guys listening, and I would love to go through and implement this. And let's work with people that we don't like. Let's work with people that are a little frictioning, and let's get some things done so that the whole county as well as Boardman succeeds. Thank you very much.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
So your comments that you just did there, are they in the written?
I already,
Sent to Carl?
well, see, I'm glad you asked about it, Derek. Thank you for asking about it. I don't know. I feel like I'm really,
You wrote this and sent it to her.
yes.
So is the comments that you just made publicly in here? So that I can go home and think about what you just now said.
Yes.
Since I can read what you said in her letter.
Yes, when he asked, he said if there's more comments, to go ahead and add that to it.
Okay.
So, yes, thank you for asking that, Karen, I really do appreciate it, because, it's the better than 4 minute and the gallery.
Okay, because I can listen to the tape of this then.
Yes.
Hear what you said.
And I want to know, you and Richard, I have a little comment section on the video, if you can put it on that link, about you guys dominating Boardman in 2 weeks ago. I'm all for that, like, let's make it happen, and I want you to know I was cheering for that when I heard that on video as well too. Because it does put Boardman at ease and make Boardman more like what he said, a real operation for the continuity of Boardman.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other public comments? About online, do we have any public comments online? Don't see any, do you?
The only member of the public is the Morrow County Observer.
Okay. All right, so having gone through our agenda and the public comment, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. And again, if there are additional comments